I still remember the November frost settling on my windowsill the night I noticed it. Nothing dramatic, just a look, the kind that barely grazes the surface, but leaves something bruised underneath. It had been a long day, the kind where everything smelled faintly of cinnamon and old casserole. Alex had driven in from the city, and Sherry brought her usual pear tart. We were all crowded around the table, forks clinking and small pleasantries floating above the roast chicken. I was sitting at the far end, close to the sideboard, my good cardigan buttoned up tight. It was colder than usual for mid-November. My old boots had split near the sole, and I made an offhand remark, half laughing, about needing new ones come December. That's when it happened. Sherry didn't flinch. Her smile stayed thin and polished, but her eyes flicked to Alex. Just briefly. As if I'd said something I shouldn't have. Something indecent. He didn't notice. He never does. He just nodded, mouth full, and asked about the garden. But that look, that little glance, it stuck to me. I told myself it was nothing. A misread moment. Sherry was always gracious, in her way. Crisp blouses, perfect eyeliner, never a hair out of place. She sent me texts with heart emojis, asked about my prescriptions, called me mom with that bright, airy tone. But afterward, when I folded the tablecloth and scraped the dishes clean, her glance kept circling back to me. Like a thread that had come loose and wouldn't tuck back in. It wasn't until later, after the goodbyes, after the porch light flicked off, that I stood at my kitchen sink, hands deep in warm suds, and realized something had shifted. Not loud. Not cruel. Just cold. A chill that didn't come from the broken window seal or the Missouri winter, but from something quieter. More permanent. I dried my hands slowly and stared out at the frost-tipped lawn. I couldn't name it yet. But I had begun to feel it. The weeks that followed drifted in quietly, like leaves slipping across the porch. Nothing loud. Nothing sharp. Just changes so small, you'd only notice if you had nowhere else to be. Sherry began speaking over me more often, especially when Alex was around. I'd offer to bring something for Sunday lunch, pickled beets, maybe a lemon pie, but she'd smile tight and say, "Oh no, don't trouble yourself. We've got it handled." There was always an edge to it. Not cruel, not even unkind. Just final. As if my offer itself had become a burden. Once, when I brought over my old set of mixing bowls, thick porcelain, chipped at the rim, Sherry didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. "We really don't have room, Margaret. Maybe donate them somewhere?" I said I would. I didn't. I brought them back home and stacked them quietly under the sink. Things that once felt natural, setting the table, folding the kids' laundry, suddenly felt like trespasses. Sherry began to refold the towels after I'd folded them. She moved the dish soap back to its correct spot every time I visited. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I'd overstepped. Maybe I was being sensitive. But then, one afternoon in early February, I heard her. I'd come by to drop off a parcel of mail that had been mistakenly delivered to my house. Sherry was in the kitchen, phone pressed between her cheek and shoulder, stirring something in a pan. She didn't hear me come in. "We're already doing too much for her," she said, low but clear. "She should be grateful." I froze. My coat still on, my hand still clutching the envelope. She paused, listening. "No, she doesn't complain. That's part of it. It's like she expects it now." I left the envelope on the counter and slipped out before she saw me. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. The house was quiet except for the wind pressing against the siding. I didn't cry. I just sat, the words echoing in the corners of the room like moths thudding against a screen door. She should be grateful. I had never asked for much. My life had been built on modesty, simple things. A clean home. Sunday radio. A garden that bloomed just enough. I'd worked for 31 years in the school cafeteria, and though my hands had aged rough and my back no longer held long hours, I was proud. I'd never been one to ask for favors. But slowly, invisibly, my life had begun to contract. My refrigerator grew emptier between trips to the store. I halved my prescriptions, stretching them out just in case. I canceled the newspaper delivery, then the pest service, then my sewing magazine. The garden, once full of bell peppers and heirloom tomatoes, had begun to look tired. When Alex called, I never mentioned any of this. What would I say? That I couldn't afford new winter boots? That I was rinsing out tea bags for a second cup? He would worry. He'd feel caught in the middle. And more than anything, I didn't want to add weight to the life he'd built. He always said, "You're taken care of, Mom. Just enjoy life." So I tried. But there's a kind of silence that settles over you, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that thickens like fog. It seeps into your bones. You begin to move slower, speak less, expect nothing. I remember sitting in my armchair one night, flipping through an old photo album. Alex at 10, holding a frog he caught near Lake Wyman. His cheeks were still round then, his hair sunburnt. I'd written "First Catch" in the corner with a blue marker. That little boy had called me his best friend once. Now, I didn't know if he even knew what my days looked like. Every time I asked Sherry to pass along a message about a doctor's appointment or a change in my insurance, she said she'd take care of it. That Alex was so swamped and she'd filter things so he wouldn't be distracted. And I believed her. Because I wanted to. Because that's what family does. One day, I called to wish Alex a happy birthday. He thanked me kindly, but seemed surprised when I mentioned the card I'd left at their door. "I didn't see anything," he said. "Are you sure you left it here?" I almost apologized. But then I saw the card a week later, opened and pushed to the side of their entry table, behind a stack of catalogs. The envelope had never been sealed. That was when something quiet inside me began to turn. Not a breaking. Just a small, slow pivot. I began keeping notes, small ones. Dates. Times. Bank deposits that didn't match. Insurance bills I hadn't known about. Packages that never arrived. I kept them all in a little notebook in my kitchen drawer, beneath the soup ladle. I didn't know what I was building. But I knew I needed to be ready. Veterans Day arrived with a clear sky and a sharp chill in the air. Alex had asked if he and Sherry could come by for pie. He said it casually, like it was nothing, but something about his voice sounded off, more polite than warm. I baked the apple pie from scratch, the same one I used to make when he was little. I even pulled out the linen napkins from the drawer, the ones with the blue stitching along the edges. I hadn't used them in years. I don't know what I was trying to prove. Sherry brought a salad in a sleek white bowl and set it on the table without saying much. Her perfume smelled like orchids and cold metal. Alex seemed distracted, checking his phone often, though he smiled when he sat down beside me. We made the usual small talk, traffic, the neighbor's dog, some fundraiser Sherry was involved in. I nodded along, my fingers carefully slicing the pie into equal wedges. Then Alex cleared his throat. "So, how's the cabin in the Ozarks treating you?" he asked, his tone light. "You always wanted a place near the lake." I paused mid-slice. "What cabin?" He laughed a little, as if I were joking. "The one I bought you 2 years ago, remember? Just off Lake Dunlap. Fully furnished. You've been getting the monthly support for it too, right? $2,000? I looked at him. Slowly. "Alex. I've never seen that money. Or a cabin." The knife trembled slightly in my hand, but I kept it steady. He stared at me, his brow furrowed. "Wait. What?" Across the table, Sherry's fork slipped against her plate. A sharp clink. She didn't say a word, but I saw her face shift, just a flicker. Her eyes didn't widen in confusion. They widened in panic. I stood up and walked into the kitchen. I didn't slam anything. I didn't raise my voice. I just placed the pie on the counter and took a breath. My hands were shaking. I came back to the table and sat down. Neither of them said anything for a long moment. Finally, Alex asked, softer this time, "Are you sure, Mom?" "Yes," I said. And then nothing. Just silence. The kind that makes the air feel thick. I excused myself early. Said I wasn't feeling well. Sherry offered to help clean up. I told her no, thank you. As I drove home through the dark Missouri roads, the frost beginning to form on the windshield, my mind was too quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just replayed the moment over and over again. The thing about betrayal is that it rarely roars. Most times, it whispers. At home, I made tea and sat in the living room without turning on the lamp. The windows reflected the room back at me like a mirror, dim, motionless. A cabin. Monthly payments. All of it stolen. But it wasn't just the money. It was what it represented. I'd believed I was cared for. That they were looking out for me. And all this time, behind my back, someone had been draining what little security I had left. I thought about every email Sherry had offered to handle, every account she said she'd streamline, every time she insisted Alex was too busy and that I should come to her directly. And I had trusted her. I had wanted to believe that I was part of their life. That I wasn't just lingering nearby. The next morning, I called Alex. "I want to see the paperwork," I said calmly. He didn't argue. We agreed to meet at the bank the following afternoon. That night, I opened the drawer under my sink and took out the little notebook, the one I'd been keeping since February. I added a new entry at the bottom. November 11th, cabin. Support payments. Fraud? I turned to a clean page. And began a list. The bank smelled of paper and quiet desperation. You could feel the fluorescent lighting on your skin, too white, too clean. Alex looked uncomfortable in the chair beside me, flipping his phone screen down on the desk, as if that might help him focus. The branch manager, a woman named Rhonda, typed quickly. Her lips pressed tight as she scanned documents. I had brought my ID and social security card in a worn envelope. My hands didn't shake when I handed them over. Alex watched the screen as Rhonda opened a set of accounts. "There it is," she said, adjusting her glasses. "This account is under your name, Mrs. Parker. Opened 2 years ago. Monthly deposits of $2,000, all labeled as housing support from Parker Logistics." Alex leaned forward. "But that's not her address." "No," Rhonda said. "The address listed is 124 Wren Street." I felt a coldness bloom in my chest. "I've never lived there," I said. Rhonda turned to me. "And you've never authorized a forwarding of funds from this account to another?" I shook my head. She clicked further. "It appears these funds were rerouted monthly to a separate checking account under a secondary user." She paused, then added carefully, "and Emily Parker." Alex's mouth opened, then closed. "She's had access to my payroll accounts," he said quietly. "She said she was organizing everything for tax purposes." I didn't know. Rhonda printed out the records without being asked. A thick folder of transactions, all bearing my name, my stolen signature, the echo of someone else's control. I took the folder under my arm and walked out into the weak winter sunlight. Alex followed me out. "Mom." "Later," I said. And I left him standing there, looking 10 years older than he had an hour before. Back home, I placed the folder on the dining table and stood staring at it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The house was cold, but I didn't light the fireplace. I let the silence fill the space between my ears. I thought of the day Sherry moved in with Alex. She brought throw pillows, linen curtains, a houseplant that died within the month. She said she wanted freshness in the home. I offered to help unpack. She said no, thank you, it would be quicker this way. Even then, I felt it, that sense of being quietly pushed to the edge. I remembered her first birthday dinner. I had made lemon chicken and mashed potatoes, but she didn't touch them. Said she was on a cleanse. I ended up eating alone while she sipped sparkling water and Alex scrolled through emails. None of it seemed important then. Little things. We all have them. But they weren't little, were they? They were signs. And I had missed every single one. Now I sat at my table in a wool sweater, the sleeves slightly too long. My teacup had gone cold. I didn't warm it up. Outside, the wind moved dry leaves along the sidewalk. A shutter clicked loose on the garage and tapped softly against the brick. The house felt older than it had the day before. I thought of my husband, Walter. He died in the spring, 12 years ago. He used to sit at this very table, reading the paper, tapping the side of his mug when the news upset him. He would have known. He would have seen right through Sherry. I looked down at my lap, where my hands rested, one folded over the other. Still. Waiting. I didn't call anyone. Not Alex. Not the lawyer. Not Rhonda. I needed one night. One single night to let the betrayal settle properly into my bones. At 9:12 p.m., my doorbell rang. I didn't answer. Whoever it was, Alex or Sherry, they stood there for a while. Then left. I went to bed without brushing my teeth. I didn't even pull back the quilt, just laid down fully dressed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed. The low sound threaded through the dark like a memory. My eyes didn't close for a long time. The next morning, around 8:30, my doorbell rang. I knew it would be her before I even opened the curtain. Sherry stood on the porch, hands folded, eyes red-rimmed. She looked smaller than usual, not in height or weight, but in presence. That brittle poise of hers was gone, replaced by something more desperate. I didn't open the door right away. Just watched her for a moment through the window pane. Her breath fogged the cold glass as she leaned slightly forward. Finally, I unlocked it. Only halfway. Please, she said, voice cracking, can we talk? I stepped aside. She came in slowly, like she thought I might change my mind. In the living room, I didn't offer her a seat. She took one anyway, perching on the edge of the sofa like a guest unsure of her welcome. I know what you've found, she began. Alex told me about the bank. About the folder. I said nothing. Her hands clutched the strap of her handbag, twisting it. I never meant for it to go this far. I just thought, your accounts were going unused. And my parents, they needed. She stopped. You weren't using the cabin, she added quietly. It was just sitting there. I looked at her. Not with anger. Not even with pain. Just observation. You created a false email, I said. You forged documents. You intercepted letters addressed to me. She blinked quickly. I was going to fix it. I had a plan to repay. You emptied it, I interrupted, voice low. You emptied my life without a word. She sat there, breath shallow. Then she began to cry, not loudly, not theatrically, but with small, sharp sobs. Like the kind you try to hold in but can't. Please, she whispered. Don't take this to court. Don't ruin us. I stood still, my hands folded in front of me. She looked up at me with eyes wide and trembling. I'll pay it back. Every penny. I swear. We can set up a repayment plan. I panicked. It got out of hand. But we can fix it. We. That word landed heavily in the room. You didn't come here to apologize, I said. You came because you're afraid. She didn't deny it. And that told me everything. Sherry had always been skilled at politeness. She knew the shape of kindness but not its weight. She wore empathy like a scarf, useful when cold, discarded when warm. This wasn't remorse. It was fear. Fear of consequences. Of exposure. Of the life she had built unraveling under the light. She began detailing a plan, installments, interest, promises notarized and filed. Her words tumbled over each other like pebbles in a stream. I let her speak. Then I said, "Leave." She looked at me, startled. "I'm not pressing charges," I said. "But I'm also not negotiating. This isn't yours to fix. Margaret, please. Leave." She stood slowly. Adjusted her coat. Her eyes searched mine, maybe for softness, maybe for that thread of familiarity I once extended to her. There was nothing. As she walked to the door, I added, "You don't get to rewrite this." She paused, back still to me. Then she left. The door clicked shut behind her like the final period of a long, unwanted chapter. After she was gone, I stood in the middle of the room, arms loose at my sides. There was no satisfaction. No triumph. Only space. A sudden, startling quiet. I went into the kitchen, washed a plate left in the sink, and opened the window. The air was cold, but clean. That afternoon, I sat at the table with my lawyer and signed the documents for restitution. Quiet signatures in blue ink. Sherry would begin returning what she could. Slowly. Methodically. Legally. But it wasn't about the money anymore. It never had been. It was about being seen. Not managed. Not pacified. Seen. And now, finally, I was. 3 weeks passed in quiet turns. The trees, now bare, stretched their limbs toward skies the color of dishwater. I filled my days with the odd comfort of routine, airing linens, mending seams, thinning out drawers that hadn't been opened in years. The file folder stayed on my dining table for a time, but eventually I moved it to the bookshelf, between an old gardening guide and the poetry of Wendell Berry. I didn't see Alex during those weeks. Not until the day of the mediation. It was held in a law office 2 towns over, a glass building with carpets too plush for comfort. The receptionist offered coffee I didn't take. I wore my gray wool dress and carried a notepad in my handbag, though I didn't write a single word. Tanya, my lawyer, greeted me with a quiet nod. Alex was already there, sitting stiffly in a chair, his hands folded between his knees. Sherry sat beside him, carefully dressed, eyes downcast. Her heels clicked on the tile when she stood. We were led into a room with a polished table and thick binders stacked at each seat. No judge. Just lawyers and pages and time. Sherry began first. Her voice was low, practiced, trembling where it should tremble. "I made a mistake, Margaret," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I know I've hurt you. But I want to make it right. I want to fix what I broke. Can we go back?" I looked at her. At the woman who had poured me tea, smiled across birthday cakes, called me mom while methodically cutting me out of my own life. Can we go back? No, I thought. There is no going back to a moment that was never honest to begin with. "I can be better," she added, voice soft. I listened to the words, but I watched her hands, neatly manicured, fingers curling slightly against the edge of her chair. Not in regret. In anticipation. In fear. She wasn't pleading with me. She was trying to contain what could no longer be contained. I turned to Tanya and nodded once. She slid a single-page document across the table, a final agreement, separate from restitution. It simply stated that I relinquished all contact with the Parker household. That I would receive no calls, no letters, no future entanglements. Permanent closure. Not legal revenge. Just a clean end. Sherry blinked at it. "You don't want anything else?" "No," I said. "Just this." Alex finally looked at me. His eyes had dark circles now, the kind that don't come from lack of sleep but from something more hollowing. "Mom," he began, but didn't finish. I didn't speak again. We signed. Each in silence. When it was done, I stood, adjusted my coat, and left the room. I didn't look back. On the way home, the radio played something soft and unfamiliar. I turned it off and drove in the quiet. The sky was beginning to gray at the edges. Somewhere on the horizon, smoke rose from a chimney. Back at home, I lit the fireplace. The first time in weeks. I made soup, just enough for one, and sat at the table with a book open in front of me. I didn't read. Just let the heat of the broth warm my hands. That night, I slept without dreams. Not peace, exactly. But something close. Spring arrived slowly in the Ozarks. The thaw came first in the soil, that quiet softening that only gardeners and grave diggers really notice. Then in the air, the way it shifted from bitter to still. Not warm yet, but waiting. That's when I moved. The cabin was smaller than I remembered from the photos. Just under 1,000 square feet, 2 bedrooms, a wraparound porch with faded paint. The keys were handed over without ceremony, no real estate agent or ribbon or final walkthrough. Just me, standing in the driveway, the gravel soft under my shoes, the birds quiet in the trees. It smelled of dust and cedar. The furniture had been untouched for months, some of it plastic wrapped, some already worn in. A blue couch, a small round table, a bookshelf half filled with paperbacks no one had claimed. The lake was visible through the back windows. Not close, but near enough. I could see the water move when the wind caught it. The first days were full of small labors. I cleaned. I unpacked the few things I brought, my cast iron skillet, my sewing basket, the quilt Walter and I had shared in our first house. I bought lavender starts from the nursery in town and planted them beneath the kitchen window. The soil crumbled easily in my hands. No stones. No resistance. Inside, I repainted the kitchen. Pale green. The color of calm. I ordered a rocking chair for the porch. It arrived in a flat box, and I assembled it myself over 2 afternoons. The arms were smooth, the motion quiet. In the mornings, I drank coffee on that porch. No television, no phone ringing. Just the hum of insects returning, the occasional thrum of a boat engine in the distance. Alex came once a week. Never unannounced. Always polite. He'd bring things, groceries, a set of towels, once even a new bird feeder. He always asked permission first. He never brought Sherry. Sometimes we'd sit together. Sometimes we didn't speak much. There were still too many things between us, but he didn't try to cross them anymore. He just sat, hands folded, eyes on the lake. I didn't know, he said once. I should have known. I nodded. That was enough. We didn't revisit it. We didn't pry. What mattered was now. I found a rhythm in that cabin. I kept the windows open as much as the bugs allowed. I learned the names of the birds nesting near the roof. I cooked simple meals. I went to sleep early. I woke with the light. My name was still mine. My accounts, secure. My days, quiet. Some might say it was lonely. But they don't understand what a relief solitude can be after years of being slowly erased. The silence here wasn't the same kind I had back in Missouri. That silence was heavy, clogged with what-ifs and maybe she didn't means. This silence was light. Clean. Mine. I stopped waiting for calls. I stopped checking the mail with dread. I began to reread old novels, the kind with yellowing pages and margins filled with my own handwriting from a lifetime ago. I remembered myself. Not the version of me they needed. Not the mother as martyr or the giver as ghost. Just Margaret. I stitched new curtains. I planted herbs in a box outside the back door. I learned how to mend the screen when it tore in the wind. I started keeping a small notebook again, not for dates or evidence, but for observations. The way the light moved across the floorboards in the evening. The way the pine tree swayed just before rain. No one was taking notes on me anymore. No one was watching what I spent or logging what I gave. I was no longer useful to anyone. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. It was a Thursday when the letter arrived. No return address. The postmark smudged. Just my name written carefully across the front, the handwriting neat, almost childlike. For a moment, I thought it might be from a distant cousin, or perhaps one of the neighbors I'd quietly left behind. But when I opened it, I knew. Sherry. The handwriting was hers, smaller than I remembered, more deliberate. The paper was lined, torn from a notebook. Nothing ornate. She began with my name. No, dear Margaret. Just Margaret. She wrote that prison was not what she'd expected. That the days were long and the nights loud. That the women around her had stories worse than hers, and yet they found ways to laugh, to forgive themselves. She said she was trying. Trying to be someone new. Trying to understand how she had gotten so far from herself. She said she missed her old life, but not the parts that were about performance. She missed warmth. She missed simplicity. Then came the part one knew was coming, even before my eyes found it. I hope one day you can forgive me. She didn't plead. Didn't justify. Just wrote it plainly, like an apology folded into a school lunchbox. Then, I would like to come see you, if you'd allow it. She signed her name, not Sherry Parker, but just Sherry. I read the letter once. Then I folded it, placed it on the hearth, and lit a match. The paper curled quickly, blackening at the corners, the ink running like tears. I didn't cry. I sat in the rocking chair, the smoke rising gently into the chimney, and watched the last of her words vanish into flame. Some things, once severed, do not heal in the way people hope. Some betrayals rewrite the shape of a life so thoroughly that even regret can't find a place to rest. It wasn't about revenge. I didn't need her to suffer. But I couldn't offer her a door back in, not to my life, not to my home, not to the quiet I had finally earned. Alex didn't mention the letter when he visited the next week. I wondered if he knew she had written it. If she had sent one to him, too. He brought me honey from a roadside stand and sat on the porch without speaking for a long time. When he finally did speak, it was about the weather. Feels like fall's trying to come back. It always does, I said. Just for a minute. We didn't say more. We didn't need to. The next day, I walked the shoreline behind the cabin, where the trees gave way to rock and thin grass. I carried a small tin in my pocket with a few seeds, wildflowers, the kind that need space and stillness to take root. I planted them quietly, kneeling in the soil. Not to bury anything. But to begin again. My son made a generous gift. But when I learned the truth, he lost everything. That sentence came to me one morning as I stirred my coffee. I didn't speak it aloud. Just let it settle in the quiet kitchen, the windows open, the sound of the lake lapping softly at the edge of my new life. Alex lost money. He lost his marriage. He lost a version of the world where people were who they claimed to be, and trust was enough. But he found something else. He found truth. He found humility. And in time, I think he found his mother, not the one he thought he had safely tucked away with kind words and wire transfers, but the real one. The woman who raised him in a house with no locks on the bedroom doors, who taught him how to sew a button and say thank you with both hands. The woman he believed he had already saved. I don't think he knows how much I'd already been saving myself. It took a long time to stop waking with that old fear, the subtle dread that something else had gone missing. But eventually, the mornings stopped arriving with that hollow tightness in my chest. I began to trust the light through the window. I began to trust myself. I never told many people what happened. Not the full story. In town, they just knew I moved out to the lake, that I kept to myself, that I baked good bread and always paid in cash. People sometimes ask if I get lonely. I tell them I've had my fill of crowded rooms where I didn't feel seen. Of smiles that meant something else entirely. I tell them I'm not alone. Not anymore. I have the cabin. The stillness. The seeds I planted by the shoreline. Some mornings, a fox appears at the edge of the woods, just to watch. As if remembering me. I don't answer letters I don't want to answer. I don't open doors unless I know who's knocking. I keep a key on a string around my neck, not because I'm afraid, but because I've learned that some things are mine to protect. I write more now. Just small notes. Nothing grand. Lists of birds I've spotted. Thoughts about the moon. I don't write about Sherry. I don't need to. She belongs to the part of my life that no longer has my permission to continue. There is no neat ending to this story. No grand redemption. No final confrontation. There is only a woman, older than she feels, younger than she seems, sitting on a porch with a coffee gone cold, watching the world go on. And knowing, at last, that the silence is hers.